Hello and welcome, and in today's video I'm going to share with you the 10 best ASA tames that you need right now. So let's get into it. In at number 10 is the Raptor, and this was first showcased in an image in a community post for ASA. And in ASA, this is a creature which you'll find no struggle with taming, as the Dino AI is improved now, so putting a creature into a built trap can be somewhat of a challenge. But luckily, you can bowler up the Raptor, so it is a pretty easy tame. You just bowler it and throw some tranks into it. Or if you wanted to, you can always go the route of the baby dino, where you need to kill the two parents, and then you can just insta-tame that baby dino, and they'll raise really quickly. That is definitely an insane feature, which I think at some point Wildcard is going to have to nerf, because it is way too OP, and I don't know if all creatures out there do have baby forms, but if there were like baby Gigas, that would be a little bit on the OP side, as it is significantly easier to kill a Giga than it is to tame one. So if you just had to kill a Giga to then just get yourself a tamed Giga, that would be absolutely insane. Next up, we have the Uti, or Uteranus, or furry T-Rex. And for this one, you will notice for the first half of the B-roll, my view distance was set to medium, so its face is a little bit deformed. If you are thinking of larger creatures and recording B-roll in ASA, you'll probably want to turn that view distance up to high, as view distance does work very differently in this game to ASE. In terms of the UT's use though, this thing is by far the best creature out there for doing any kind of bosses, and you may not be concerned with bosses yet because it's still very early into ASA, and I know loads of people are taking their time with ASA, and I'm definitely one of those people as well. But when you do need to do that boss, these things are going to be insanely crucial in actually defeating that boss. And if you want a few creatures in terms of killing bosses, tame yourself a UT, tame yourself a Daedon. For the Broodmother, use Megatheriums. For the Dragon, use Theres. And for the Megatherium, you can just use Rexes, Spinos, any form of larger carnivore. But the UT essentially is going to do the buffing of those creatures to make your creatures which are fighting that boss just even better, which is something definitely to look forward to. And just before we continue, make sure to like and subscribe, as it really does help me out. Now, the Bionic has always been a favourite creature of mine. In terms of the Barry's use though, this is by far the best creature out there for caving, and it is the best creature out there for caving in ASA, as you have literally no other options like the Shadowmane, which you'll find on Gen 2. But apart from caving, the Bionic is an extremely useful creature as well for just killing things in the map. The Bionic is actually an extremely versatile tame, which can kill things up to Rexes and Gigas pretty easily, as long as obviously you have a high level. You can't get away with a level 5 Baryonyx absolutely decimating through Gigas, but it did a pretty good job at killing this Rex, and this Rex was a high level. I think it was a 135 or something like that, and this Barry is about a level 80. Either way, it does deal a lot of damage, and compared to some larger carnivores, it has a significantly higher amount of mobility, which is something which is extremely useful again, because the Rex is very rubbish when it comes to its turning circle. Now, the Theory, or the Tickle Chicken, or Freddy Krueger, is an extremely good tame, and I've mentioned it before in being extremely useful for killing the dragon. And the reason for that is its fire ability does a significantly unfair amount of damage to carnivores, but it doesn't to herbivores, and the Therizino packs an immense amount of damage when it comes to being a herbivore. And it can also harvest dead bodies as well, which many other herbivores can't do. It's great at harvesting wood, it can harvest fiber really well, it can harvest berries really well, but you are going to need to level up that weight if you're using this thing for a lot of wood gathering. And in terms of that ability there, which we looked at in terms of its gathering fiber, that's why it's called the Tickle Chicken, because it kind of does a tickly movement with its fingers. In terms of its other uses though, this thing is also an extremely great travel mount, and it will get you everywhere in the Ark map with absolute ease. It deals an immense amount of damage to things, it travels pretty quickly, and you will not feel unsafe on this thing at all. this is actually one of the safest creatures you will find out there, and one at some point which is definitely worth the tame if you can get it into a track quite easily, as Dino AI now is significantly improved. Now, it seems a little unfair to put the Stego above the Theory, but it is an extremely useful thing to have, and in my opinion, it does deserve to be above the Theory, as especially at this stage in your ASA progress, you're probably going to be more looking towards taming a Stego than a Theory. Either way, in terms of the Stego's use, this is a great berry gatherer, of course, but it's great at gathering wood as well, and it's great at sticking up a fight. And if you're on a PvP server, now that servers are somewhat kind of fixed in ASA, these things are actually the best creature out there for doing any kind of turret soaking. And they have rider protection as well, which I'm pretty sure only the Mega Chelon has as well, if the Mega Chelon even has that. And the Mega Chelon isn't on ASA at the moment because that is a Gen 1 creature. But you're definitely going to want to level up the stamina on this thing, as its stamina is pretty poor, to say the least. But it is very, very useful, and for the things you're going to be using it for, it's not really going to be a creature which you're going to travel across the whole map with. And if you are, then be prepared to be significantly more annoyed at Arc when you finished than when you started. But either way, that is an insane commitment. And it also does deal the bleed ability when it can grapple onto a creature with its tail. But for some reason, I couldn't do that properly, even though I did use the other attack. But its normal attack does do a significant amount of damage, and the Stego definitely deals a very reasonable amount of damage. In at number 5 is the Thorler, and there is a lot to say about the Thorler. This is a really, really useful tame spawning in the Redwoods biome, which can be a bit of annoyance, and especially considering how much foliage is in the Redwoods biome now, this thing is even more dangerous than it was in ASE, as it is so hard to actually spot one of these things, especially with all the fog and the volumetrics. These things are significantly more dangerous now. And thanks to ASA being a bit buggy, their wall climbing abilities aren't as good as they used to be, but I'm sure that'll be fully fixed at some point. In terms of their uses though, these are really, really great carnivores, dealing that all famous bleed ability, and they are great travel mounts as well. These things have immense speed, they can jump, they can climb walls, if the wall actually kind of lets you climb it. The walls at the moment are pretty rubbish, and with the floating rocks, you know, this is the ASA graphics we really needed, right? All of the bugginess, but when it does work, is an extremely useful ability. And again, it can travel really fast, it's really efficient at traveling across the map, and the fact that it can deal loads of damage, that is really nice for a travel mount to have, as many other travel mounts which are very effective, like you could say the Gallimimus, if you're even going to bother to tame that thing. Those things don't pack a punch at all when it comes to damage, and it is really useful when they can, because many of Arc's creatures do want to kill you. That is the thing that Arc creatures want to do. And also, it can climb redwood trees as well. It can pretty much climb anything. Right, now we have the Rex. And if you've only played ASA and you've never played ASE, then the Rex is probably going to be a creature which you're really going to look up on. And pretty much every Arc creature at some point does want to tame a Rex. A Rex is such a cool creature, capable of so much damage, and you even get an achievement for riding it as well. And it is really, really great at killing alphas. If you don't know what alphas are yet, they're essentially buffed version of creatures which you can get pretty good loot and XP out of. Don't try taming one though, as alphas are sadly untamable. But to be honest, that would make the game a little too OP in my opinion. If you could tame like Alpha Carnos and Alpha Rexes, that might be a step too far. In terms of the Rex's abilities though, it doesn't really have an ability, but in terms of its use cases is how I should have worded it. This is by far the best boss creature out there, unless you're doing the dragon boss fight. Use those for that, do not use Rexes. It will either you will be able to win the boss, which is actually quite rare on Rexes unless you've got good Rexes, or you'll just lose it and lose everything. Just use Theories, please, please, please. But in terms of everything else, it is absolutely amazing at doing it. Mega Theorems are better on the Broodmother because they have another buff, which is great against insects. But the Rex is just such a balanced carnivore that it is one of the best creatures that you can find out there for dealing that damage to all of those creatures, and also while staying alive, because its health isn't so abysmal like some other larger carnivores that it can actually keep up a fight. But it doesn't matter too much on the island, as the boss fights rarely even last more than 5 minutes if you do have some good Rexes. But I can see why the Overseer would last significantly longer. In at number 3 is the RG, and the RG was shown in the ASA trailer, and what an insane creature this is for so many things in Ark. And I'm slightly unsure about the camera on this thing. I'm not really for the camera, like it's offside a little bit. Wildcard, bring back the old RG camera, but it still doesn't make it any less useful. This is by far the best creature out there when the game actually decides to run properly, to gather all kinds of metal and things like that. Obviously it can't gather the metal, but it has the weight to facilitate you actually gathering all of it. And if you get a good level, you have yourself some insane weight, and with obviously the weight reduction it has on metal, crystal and obsidian, and I think other resources as well, you'll have a blast of a time on it. And it does have a couple of nice cool abilities to go along with it too. Firstly, if it does kill a creature, this thing will regen insanely quickly, and you'll have that regen buff. And that's how you know that ability is working, and you'll see that on wild RGs as well. So, watch out. And especially if you are killing something near a mountain, and then once its dead body is kind of spawned in, because it's a separate kind of entity, the RGs will literally summon onto it. It's insane how quickly RGs will feast on a dead carcass if you've just killed something in like 2 seconds. RGs, and that can absolutely ruin your day. In at number 2 is the Giga, and the Giga right now is pretty much the best creature you can get in ASA, and it's definitely one which you should tame at some point, partly just because I have nostalgia reasons. But the Giga is actually a very valuable tame for going around the map and absolutely destroying all kinds of creatures. The Giga deals so much damage, and it can absolutely tear through so many creatures, although you really should not be chuffed about its stamina stat. Its stamina is by far one of the worst stats you can find in Ark. Don't bother leveling up, and also if you do level up their melee levels up really slowly. So on the Giga, it is pretty much useless to level up anything. You should really just go for those breeding mutations, as the Gigas level up so slowly. But you can always put those levels into damage if you have them, because you might as well. The Giga will just be dealing more damage. In at number 1 is the Carnotaurus, and some people may absolutely hate me for putting this thing in number 1, but there seems to be so many Carnos on ASA. Is there like an overspawn or something? There's like 6 right next to my base, and these are really great creatures which I think you should tame at some point. Definitely a creature worth taming. They are absolutely everywhere. They're really easy to tame, and their saddle is unlocked in the kind of mid-game stages. I think it's in the 50s, it might be in the 40s, and its saddle isn't very expensive as well. The Carnotaurus is an amazing creature, capable of so much more damage than a Raptor. I think it's faster than a Raptor as well. It seems faster, and it is so much more powerful than a Raptor. It has decent weight, unlike a Raptor, which is a really good thing to have, and it does have the bleed ability as well. It is capable of dealing so much damage to creatures, and it has a really nice health stat, a really decent stamina stat, decent speed, decent weight, insane damage, and with that bleed ability it deals even more. The Carnotaurus is definitely an insane creature, which although does not have the pack buff, would actually be pretty great for bosses as well, but maybe just on Gamma. I probably wouldn't bring these things into alpha fights, but they're just really great tames. Tame yourself a Carno. In my opinion, they're just so abundant, and they're so easy to tame, and they're just so good. It is 100% worth your time at some point to tame yourself a Carno. Right, ASA has been out for almost over half a year, and I decided, why not in today's video just explain my thoughts on ASA, just my general opinions, and just to see maybe is it worth it over 6 months after its release. Let's just say ASA did not release in the best state, only really having the island maps. Fast Travel Time was available free at the time. Now I think you have to pay either 5 or 10 quid for it. Can't quite remember, but that was a little bit nice that you'd have another map to play on. But most obviously did just stick to the island, including myself. I did play a little bit, but I wasn't so invigorated by the map as others were, and this map really did not release in the best of states. There were glitches and bugs like 2015 Ark all over again, even though the devs had promised a more stable, better running version of the game, which just simply wasn't delivered. But nowadays it is looking a little bit better, although all of the floating rocks found and just generally being present ever since the game released are still here. The game certainly does run a lot better, and with mods like FSR 3 for all cards that do support just any kind of DLSS or vice versa, you could actually enable frame generation without needing a 40,000 series card and still get all of the performance benefits, which I have done on my 3090. And it's crazy the 3090 still can't run this game with 60 frames per second at like medium high settings at 1440p in ASA. Okay, the 3090 is a pretty high spec GPU, not to blow my own trumpet here, but it is one which really does get a lot of performance in games. And in Ark I can max that thing out at 1440p and easily get 60. I need frame generation though in ASA to even touch that, and sometimes I still drop a little bit below it, although that is a lot less common. Still, you know, the game does run very nicely for me now with that frame generation actually being used with the FSR mod, but otherwise I simply would not be able to get those kind of frames, and before I knew about the mod I just had to deal with the somewhat subpar performance. Obviously Scorched Earth has released on ASA now too, and that really has helped a lot of things out. Bob's Tall Tales has been around too. I have listed my opinions on that in another video. I've relaxed them slightly, but still it's probably not worth it for the 25 quid asking price. Either way, if you still want to get it and support the game, you definitely can. I'm not going to stop you. I have, so you know, an example I'm showing there. But as an Ark channel, I do just tend to buy all the Ark content when it comes out. That's what I do. The videos will pay for everything anyway. But you know, Scorched Earth released in a much better state than the island, and obviously it's a somewhat recent addition to ASA. It has definitely changed it for the better. There's just a lot more going on now, and you know, it's just a nicer experience to sit through in Ark. It's just been a little bit worse as per se when it was just the island really out and official. The Scorched Earth map had a lot of diversity, and obviously it did release for free as well, not including all the Bob's Tall Tales stuff of course, but that is again besides the point. The game did release this map for free, apart from the price of the game of course, but that could be expected with any real release these days. The Oasis Vault was also locked behind Bob's Tall Tales, which is a little bit of a shame and definitely was too many, but still it is quite a nice creature, and if you get it, you'll definitely enjoy it for the 24 hours that you'll have it, because I'm confident it's only a 24-hour creature. I don't quite see the point in that. I know it's so they're not too overpowered, but still, you know, you might as well just keep them for the whole time. Obviously you can just enable that setting and they will actually feed, and then the hunger timer thing won't do its thing, and you can keep those things forever, but on most servers that probably isn't the case. The Facelsuchus also came about, and that is a really nice creature. That was free with Scorched Earth of course. It adds a completely new dimension to that map. I love that creature. It is honestly one of the best. So is the Gigantoraptor as well. That has been a really nice addition too. And obviously the Rhinogonatha, although yes, not a creature releasing on ASA, is still sort of a ASA creature, if you will. I know the B-rolls just switched over to Ark Survival Evolved. That was just for a little bit of point of comparison, because now I want to talk about the graphical differences. If you couldn't tell already, Ark Survival Evolved is looking a lot more kind of aged now that ASA has come out, and everything's sort of been reimagined. If you take the performance though and all of that and all the bugs, then maybe Survival Evolved is looking a lot better in that aspect. But in terms of looks and like all the LODs and not really the models, all the models are pretty much the same for the dinos, but all the foliage and the foliage movement, it is so much nicer and cleaner than Ark Survival Evolved could ever dream of getting it. And that is the one kind of big benefit of ASA. It looks absolutely gorgeous compared to Ark Survival Evolved. Not saying Ark Survival Evolved looks bad though. I have heard a few people saying Ark Survival Evolved just looks really ugly, but they were talking about the Switch version, and I can't really say anything about that, as that does kind of look like a muddy mess. Whereas the PC version of the game still, in my opinion, looks like quite a nice game. Yes, it came out in 2015, but it's had a sort of remastering as the game has gone on, and it's looked more impressive as things went on, and the later maps look a lot more impressive than the earlier ones, of course, as they've been built in more recent times, and that really does add the elements to the game. It still is obviously where you're going to find all of those maps. ASA has definitely got a long way to go in terms of getting all the Ark DLCs, so if you want to actually complete all that story available at the moment, you're going to just have to play everything on Survival Evolved, or maybe the first 2 maps on Survival Ascended and all the rest on Survival Evolved. But if I did still have to choose one game, it would be Survival Evolved. Although Survival Ascended is a really nice, gorgeous looking game, and it's still a work in progress, that is probably the main reason why I would choose Survival Evolved. It is like a finished game now. They've essentially stopped developing for it, and that is it in its final form as a sense. Also, I find some of the mods that you can find on Survival Evolved and the integration of those mods is just a little bit nicer for PC, but for consoles, ASA is a literal dream as mods are accessible at your doorsteps. I do like that the mods are also all free on Survival Evolved. You do have to pay for some of them on Survival Ascended, but I don't really have too much against that, and I'm not going to argue that paid mods shouldn't be a thing, as mod creators do definitely deserve a lot of respect for everything that they do and make. Come on, they do spend a lot of time making and developing mods for this game. They do deserve all of the respect that they can possibly get for making these mods with really high standards and us really enjoying them. So it is definitely a good thing that mods are paid for now, but it still is a little bit of a shame in my opinion. The thing is, with ASA though, the performance and just all of the lack of content means I can't quite recommend it as much as Survival Evolved, although if you're looking to get into it, it is in a much better state now than it obviously was 6 months ago.